The soup pot was the first thing that made me pay attention. 2 months into my marriage, I started noticing small details. Not because I was naturally suspicious, but because small details often reveal what bigger things are trying to hide. The pot was old, dented at the bottom, and its lid never sat straight. It had belonged in Norma's kitchen for years. Every Sunday evening, she made stock on the stove, and the smell filled the house before dinner. I did not mind the soup. What I noticed was the spoon. Whenever Norma stirred, she dragged the spoon slowly across the bottom of the pot, metal against metal, a scraping sound she probably no longer heard, but I heard it. At first, it was only irritating. Then it became a warning bell. Scrape, pause, request. Scrape, pause, guilt. The sound trained my body before my mind admitted why. Some houses reveal themselves through grand arguments. Norma's house revealed itself through a spoon moving in circles, while everyone pretended the next demand was just another ingredient. And soon I learned that Norma often said her most important things while doing ordinary tasks. "Since you live in the family house," she said one evening, scraping the spoon against the pot, "it only makes sense that you help more with the shared expenses." I stood in the doorway with a glass of water. Daniel sat at the kitchen table. Neither of them looked directly at me. That was the first Sunday in September. Daniel and I had been married 31 days. I gave a calm, vague answer and went upstairs. That night, I lay awake thinking about the phrase, family house, and the way Norma had said it, as if my moving in had confirmed an arrangement they had already discussed without me. My name is Elena. I was 31, and I worked in financial compliance for a regional accounting firm. My job was to read documents carefully and find the gap between what they appeared to say and what they actually meant. That skill made me useful to employers and inconvenient to anyone hoping I would confuse affection with access. I knew how pressure hid inside polite language. I knew how people divided one unreasonable request into 10 reasonable-looking ones. What embarrassed me later was how long it took to admit that the pattern I was trained to find at work had followed me home and sat down at the kitchen table. At work, I investigated employees who divided suspicious transactions into harmless-looking amounts. No single payment attracted attention. The pattern did. I should have recognized the same method at home sooner, but love persuades us to treat repetition as coincidence. Daniel and I met at a community tax clinic. He was patient with elderly clients and remembered everyone's coffee order. He told me Norma had raised him alone after his father became ill, and I admired his loyalty. I did not understand that loyalty in their house meant never asking where his mother's needs ended and his own life began. Before our wedding, Daniel signed a prenuptial agreement protecting my house and retirement accounts. He did so cheerfully, saying he loved me, not my property. Norma called the agreement cold. At the time, I thought her reaction was generational. Later, I realized she considered boundaries an insult because she expected access. The agreement had felt almost embarrassing then, like carrying an umbrella on a cloudless day. My mother insisted. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, tapping the packet with one finger, and said romance should never require a woman to become legally careless. I loved Daniel. I also trusted my mother. That trust became the hinge on which the rest of my life turned. I was good at it. I had also been careful with money my entire adult life. My mother raised me alone after my father left, and she taught me to record everything. Not because everyone is dishonest. She used to say, because memory is optimistic. Paper is not. I owned a house of my own, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. I had renovated it myself, room by room. It was fully paid off, no mortgage, no partner on the deed. When I married Daniel Mercer, I moved into his family home for practical reasons. He worked from there, and commuting from my house would have added too much time to his day. It was supposed to be temporary. A few months. Then we would decide what came next. The family home technically belonged to Daniel and his mother, Norma, through his late father's trust. But in every practical sense, it was Norma's house. She arranged the furniture, set the dinner schedule, controlled the pantry, and decided how things were done. At first, she seemed generous. She welcomed me, helped me make space for my things, and showed me how the household worked. Only later did I understand that her welcome was not simple kindness. It was orientation. She was showing me my assigned role. She showed me which towels Daniel preferred, which cabinet held the medicine, which chair was his father's and therefore never to be moved. Every instruction sounded harmless, but the total message was clear. The house had a memory, a hierarchy, and a script. I was not entering a shared home. I was joining a production already rehearsed, and my lines had been written before I unpacked. By the 5th week, the financial requests became more direct. I created a spreadsheet. Utilities had not risen by the amount Norma claimed. Grocery receipts included gift cards that vanished before I saw them. The gutter contractor shared Daniel's cousin's address and had no business license. My payments were not maintaining the home. They were creating cash that could be moved without questions. When I asked Daniel to review the numbers, he kissed my forehead and said marriage was not an audit. The phrase sounded rehearsed. I wanted to believe it was affection. I wanted the kiss to mean he thought I worked too hard and deserved rest. But the sentence stayed with me because it did not answer the question. People who respect you can dislike spreadsheets and still explain a bill. Daniel used tenderness to move me away from the facts. That was the moment I started saving receipts in a folder he did not know existed. The utilities are higher now, Norma said. It makes sense for you to contribute. So I did. The groceries cost more with 3 people, she said. Since you eat dinner here, you should cover a larger share, so I adjusted. The gutters need replacing this fall, she said. Daniel has always handled things like this, but he is busy, so I paid. Each request sounded reasonable on its own. That was the trap. A trap does not always snap shut, sometimes it invoices you. 100 here, 800 there, a contractor deposit, an insurance premium, a grocery run that includes cash back. By the time you notice the pattern, the person benefiting from it can point to each separate moment and ask why you are making such a big deal out of one little thing. Only when I started keeping a notebook did the pattern become clear. In 7 weeks, I had contributed more money to that house than Daniel and Norma combined. The imbalance was not accidental. Daniel deposited most of his salary into an account I had never seen, while telling me his mother's medical bills consumed it. Norma had excellent insurance and no unpaid claims. Their shared expenses allowed both of them to preserve their money while testing how quickly I would spend mine. For a house I did not own. One Thursday in October, I went to the county recorder's office during lunch. I pulled the property records and read them the way I read financial documents at work. Daniel Mercer and Norma Mercer were listed as joint owners. No liens, no complications, no other names, certainly not mine. I sat in my car for a long time with the printed deed in my hands. The paper was almost boring. Black text, parcel number, names, signatures. Nothing dramatic, nothing raised or read. Yet my hands shook as if I were holding a confession. I had been paying into a house where I had no legal claim, while they used the word family to make ownership sound rude. The deed did not hurt me. It simply refused to lie for them. Then, 3 days later, I accidentally left my phone recording. The recording continued beyond the lines about refinancing. Daniel asked what would happen if I refused. Norma said they would make living there uncomfortable until I left, then insist reconciliation required proof of trust. Proof meant adding Daniel to my deed. They discussed hiding my passport so I could not attend a work conference and packing my suitcase before the next confrontation. Norma called it creating urgency. I called attorney Maya Singh before listening a 4th time. She told me to secure my documents, freeze my credit, and avoid signing anything. We discovered Daniel had already requested a copy of my deed and obtained a preliminary loan estimate using my home's value. The bank had not approved anything, but intention was now paperwork. That phrase became Maya's anchor for the case. Intention was now paperwork, not a misunderstanding, not a passing conversation, not a mother and son daydreaming too loudly over soup. Someone had pulled records, estimated equity, contacted a lender, and drafted a route from my house to their debt. The plan had already left the kitchen. I had used a voice memo app for a work call and forgotten to stop it. When I later played it back, I heard voices from downstairs. Daniel's, Norma's, The audio was not perfect, but the words were clear enough. "If she adds me to the deed," Daniel said, "we can refinance?" "Exactly," Norma replied. "Once the property is marital, everything becomes easier." "She trusts me." Norma laughed. "Then use that." I listened to those 23 minutes 3 times. Then I called a family law attorney. The next morning, on the 53rd day of my marriage, I came downstairs to find Daniel and Norma in the kitchen. My phone was recording deliberately this time. A copy of the audio sat in encrypted storage with Maya. I had also placed a credit alert on my identity and told my supervisor where I would be. Quiet preparation made it possible to stand in that kitchen without mistaking calm for surrender. I had also moved the original deed, my passport card, my birth certificate, and my mother's ring into a safe deposit box before dawn. The drive to the bank felt surreal, like I was overreacting in a movie only I could see. Then I remembered Norma's laugh on the recording. Overreaction is what people call preparation when they hoped you would remain available. Norma was stirring that same soup pot. The spoon scraped slowly against the bottom. Daniel looked at me first. "How much did you hear last night?" "I heard enough." Norma straightened. "You seem to be misunderstanding something." That word almost made me laugh. Misunderstanding is what people say when they are caught doing something they refuse to admit. "What am I misunderstanding?" I asked. "This family supports each other," she said. "Support usually goes both ways." Daniel stepped closer. "Elena, can we talk privately?" "No." Norma crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." I looked at her. "Who owns this house?" Neither of them answered, so I said, "You want me to pay for a property I don't own?" "You're Daniel's wife?" Norma said. "And that means contributing." I nodded. "I'll contribute to my own house." For 1 second, hope crossed Daniel's face. Then it vanished. A husband who loved his wife would have been proud that she owned a paid-off home. Daniel looked terrified. That told me everything. His eyes shifted toward his mother. Hers shifted back. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. "Nothing," Daniel said. I walked upstairs. My bedroom door was open. On the bed sat my small black suitcase, half-packed. There is a humiliation in seeing your own clothes folded by people planning to corner you. My sweaters were stacked neatly. My shoes were lined beside the suitcase, as if care had been taken. That neatness made it worse. Rage would have been easier to understand if they had thrown things. Instead, they had packed me with the calm efficiency of people who believed my life could be rearranged once the paperwork was ready. My clothes were folded inside. My jewelry box was tucked into the side pocket. I opened the nightstand drawer. My passport was gone, inside Norma's desk. Police later found it beside a draft quitclaim deed and a handwritten list titled, "Elena Objections." Each objection had a prepared answer. If I mentioned the prenup, Daniel would say marriage evolved. If I mentioned fairness, Norma would accuse me of rejecting the family. If I threatened to leave, they would withhold my documents and say I was too emotional to drive. They had planned my responses more carefully than they had planned a life with me. Daniel appeared in the doorway behind me. "What is this?" I asked. He said nothing. "Daniel." His throat moved. "We weren't going to do it right away." "Do what?" He looked at the floor. Norma appeared behind him. Daniel whispered, "We thought if you moved out for a while, you might agree to put your house in both our names before coming back." The silence was absolute. There was no explanation that could make that sentence harmless. So I walked past him. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the front door. I did not take the suitcase. Those clothes had been touched by their plan. I drove to the house that had always belonged to me. My house looked exactly as I had left it, solid, quiet, untouched. I walked from room to room and touched the door frames, the kitchen counter, the banister I had sanded myself one summer until my palms blistered. The house did not comfort me because it was expensive. It comforted me because every repair had been honest. Paint cost what paint cost. Wood held where I nailed it. No one had asked me to prove love by making the walls less mine. That night, I slept without waking. By morning, my phone was full of missed calls and messages from Daniel. I blocked his number and made coffee. Maya advised me to preserve the messages before blocking. Daniel moved through apology, anger, illness, and threat in less than 3 hours. Norma claimed chest pain. Then she said my employer would be interested in how I secretly recorded family members. Finally, Daniel wrote that no one else would marry a woman who treated love like a contract. I saved everything. Compliance work had taught me that people reveal intent most clearly when the usual pressure stops working. An hour later, Daniel and Norma appeared at my door. I opened it with the security chain still in place. "Elena," Daniel said. "Can we come in?" "No." Norma stepped forward. "This is ridiculous." I smiled. "Do you know what's ridiculous? Trying to get someone to sign over property 3 days into a marriage." "We never said that," she snapped. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the doorway. "If she adds me to the deed, we can refinance." Then Norma's. "Once the property is marital, everything becomes easier." Then Daniel again. "She trusts me." And Norma laughing. "Then use that." When the recording ended, no one spoke. The silence at my front door felt different from the silence in Norma's kitchen. Their silence had been pressure. Here, it was evidence doing its work. Daniel looked at the chain lock as if it had betrayed him by existing. Norma looked past my shoulder, trying to see inside the house that had become unreachable again. Daniel swallowed. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." Norma hardened her voice. "You're throwing away a marriage over a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "I'm leaving because I finally stopped making excuses." Daniel asked quietly, "What do you want?" "A divorce." The papers were already being prepared. Maya showed me the draft divorce petition with a calm that made the room feel steadier. Names, dates, exhibits requested relief. The language was dry, but to me it sounded like oxygen. After weeks of soup, pot hints and household pressure, the law was finally naming the pattern plainly: coercion, attempted conversion of separate property, withholding identification, financial misrepresentation. Norma finally said, "We only wanted security." I nodded. There it is, not love, not family, security, mine, the house I had paid off, the savings I had built, the future they thought would become available simply because I married Daniel. The divorce took 5 months. My house stayed in my name. My savings stayed mine. The money I had paid into their house was addressed in the settlement. The forged loan preparation was referred to investigators. Daniel avoided criminal charges because the application had not been completed, but the evidence shaped the divorce. He reimbursed my documented contributions and paid part of my legal fees. Norma returned my passport through her attorney without explanation. Returning it without explanation was Norma's final attempt to make the incident ordinary. Maya refused the envelope until her attorney signed a receipt identifying exactly where the passport had been found. The location matched the desk drawer police photographed beside the quitclaim deed. Daniel later claimed he did not know Norma had taken it. The recording contradicted him. His voice asked whether hiding identification was too much, and Norma answered that urgency required discomfort. He knew enough to question the plan and chose participation instead of stopping it. During deposition, Maya asked Daniel when he first discussed my house with Norma. He said after the wedding. Then she produced a message dated 6 weeks before it. Norma had sent him the county property record and estimated my equity. Daniel replied with a ring emoji and the words, "One step at a time." The marriage had not created their interest. It had formalized the access they expected. Maya walked him through every Sunday request: utilities, groceries, gutters, insurance. Each payment reduced my available cash, while their hidden savings remained untouched. The strategy depended on making me feel ungenerous if I examined the total. Seeing the requests arranged in order changed them. 1 payment looked like partnership, 27 looked like extraction. Daniel kept saying he had intended to pay me back later, but later had no date, no amount, no agreement, and no account set aside. Later was just the place he stored obligations he hoped I would become too tired to collect. Did Elena ever refuse a reasonable household expense? Maya asked. Not until she became suspicious. Suspicious of what? Daniel looked toward his attorney. There was no safe answer. If nothing was wrong, suspicion should not have changed the definition of reasonable. If something was wrong, the requests were evidence of it. That deposition ended the dispute over reimbursement. Daniel agreed to repay every contribution, not supported by a legitimate shared bill. That distinction ended my temptation to divide them into mastermind and follower. Norma designed pressure. Daniel benefited from it. A husband does not become innocent merely because his mother supplied the language. The divorce discovery process uncovered why they wanted my house so urgently. Daniel and Norma had guaranteed a failing restaurant owned by his cousin. The family home secured part of the debt, and a balloon payment was due within 4 months. Refinancing both houses would have produced enough cash to delay foreclosure. When Maya showed me the loan documents, I felt the last scraps of romantic confusion leave. Their crisis was real. That almost made it worse. Real need had been twisted into fraud when honesty would have given me a choice. I might have said no. I might have suggested bankruptcy counsel. I might have helped in some limited, documented way. What they wanted was not help. They wanted my consent without my knowledge. They could have told me. I might have helped them examine options. Instead, they treated marriage as a chance to acquire collateral without giving me the information necessary to consent. The restaurant still failed. The family home was sold, its equity divided according to the trust. Norma told relatives I had made her homeless. In reality, the sale paid the debt and left her enough for a smaller condominium. What she lost was not shelter. It was the scale of life she expected my property to preserve. Relatives called for months. Some appealed to compassion. Others warned that women who insisted on strict ownership ended up lonely. I asked each caller whether they planned to add Daniel to their deed. The conversations became remarkably short. One aunt surprised me. She apologized and said Norma had used the same tactics after Daniel's father died, pressuring siblings to contribute while hiding insurance proceeds. The pattern had existed long before me. I had not caused the family conflict by resisting. Resistance merely made the conflict visible. That call gave me a strange kind of relief. I was not special. They had not invented the machinery for me. I had simply been the first person with enough documentation and enough distance to stop it from working. There was grief in that realization, but also freedom. A pattern that predated you does not become your fault because you refuse to continue it. At work, I disclosed the situation because Norma threatened my professional reputation. My supervisor reviewed the recording and placed a security alert at reception. No one questioned my ethics. The threat had depended on my believing exposure would shame me more than it shamed the people plotting fraud. That belief is common in financial abuse. The victim is made to feel foolish for trusting, while the person exploiting trust presents cleverness as entitlement. I stopped carrying their embarrassment. Months after the divorce, our firm asked me to design a seminar on financial coercion inside families. I resisted at first. I did not want the worst 53 days of my life converted into professional branding. Then I reviewed actual cases: spouses added to deeds under pressure, elderly parents signing loans they did not understand, newlyweds told boundaries proved a lack of love. We built the seminar around documents, not confession. How to read a title, how authorized user status differs from ownership, how to freeze credit, where to store identification, what questions to ask before paying for property in someone else's name. The first session filled every chair. People came in looking embarrassed, carrying folders pressed to their chests. A retired teacher, a newly married electrician, a woman whose adult son wanted her to sign a business loan by Friday. I started by saying no one in that room was foolish for trusting someone they loved. The room exhaled at once. Shame is one of financial coercion's favorite locks. Naming it made the first key turn. Afterward, a young man waited until the room emptied. His partner's family wanted him to refinance a condominium he owned before marriage. They called it commitment. He recognized Daniel's phrases in my examples. I did not tell him what decision to make. I gave him a list of independent attorneys and said commitment survives informed advice. Pressure fears it. 2 weeks later, he wrote that the refinancing plan had been withdrawn the moment he requested full statements. The family said involving lawyers destroyed trust. He answered that secrecy had done that first. His message stayed pinned above my desk. My own house changed too. During the marriage, I kept rooms neutral because Daniel disliked colors he called too personal. After the sage kitchen, I painted the spare room deep blue and turned it into a library. I replaced the guest bed with shelves, a reading chair, and a desk facing the garden. The first night I sat there, rain touched the windows and the house made its ordinary settling sounds. I realized I had been listening for footsteps that could no longer enter. Peace did not arrive as celebration. It arrived as the absence of negotiation. No one asked why I needed a receipt. No one sighed when I locked the front door. No one turned my boundaries into a family referendum. The quiet was strange at first. I kept waiting for a second voice to tell me what the quiet meant. Eventually, it meant only itself. Daniel remarried 3 years later. I learned through a mutual acquaintance who seemed embarrassed to tell me. I hoped he had changed. Hope did not require contact, warning his new wife, or reopening a door I had closed. His future choices belonged to him. My safety no longer depended on predicting them. Norma sent one final holiday card without a return address. Inside, she wrote that family should forgive. I wrote nothing back. Forgiveness, if it existed, did not create access. Too many people use the word to request the benefits of reconciliation without the labor of repair. I placed the card in recycling. On the 5th anniversary of my moving home, Priya from across the street came over carrying a dented soup pot she had inherited from her grandmother. We cooked together while her toddler drew on scrap paper at the table. The lid sat crooked. The spoon scraped the bottom. For a moment, memory returned with perfect sound, Norma's voice, Daniel's silence, the plan waiting beneath an ordinary Sunday. Then Priya tasted the soup and asked whether it needed salt. A little, I said. She handed me the shaker. Nothing followed. No demand, no hidden agreement, no price for being welcomed into the room. That ordinary exchange was how I knew the story no longer owned the sound. During mediation, Daniel said his mother had only wanted security. I asked why her security required making mine disappear. He had no answer that did not sound like confession. The mediator wrote something down and did not look up. Daniel twisted his wedding ring, though by then it meant very little. For months, he had argued that I misunderstood the plan. My question left no room for that. If their safety depended on my ignorance, then what they wanted had never been safety. It had been control with a softer name. He asked whether counseling could save us. I told him counseling helps people tell the truth. It cannot help when one person wants a better strategy for obtaining the same property. The judge finalized the divorce on a rainy Tuesday. 3 days of marriage required 5 months of legal work to unwind. That imbalance became its own lessons. Entering an arrangement takes one signature. Leaving may require proving what the signature never meant to surrender. That winter, I slept, cooked in my own kitchen, and remembered what peace felt like. In spring, I painted the kitchen deep sage green because I liked it and no one else had an opinion. Years later, a young woman named Priya bought the house across the street. I brought her cookies on moving day, no agenda, no expectations. Just kindness with no conditions. When I walked back home, I looked at my house again, not as an asset to defend, not as proof I had survived, just as home. The best investment I ever made was not the house itself. It was the habit my mother taught me. Write things down. Pay attention. Know what belongs to you. A house can shelter you. A habit can warn you before the locks need changing. I had listened when the spoon scraped the bottom of the pot. And on the 53rd day of my marriage, I said no. That was enough. Not loud, not dramatic. Just one clean refusal after weeks of being steered toward surrender. Sometimes enough begins exactly there. Years later, I still notice scraping spoons. The sound no longer frightens me. It reminds me that danger is often repetitive before it becomes dramatic, and paying attention to small patterns is one way we honor ourselves. Norma wanted every expense covered. Daniel wanted my house converted into a safety net. What neither understood was that I had already invested in the most valuable protection I could own, the ability to recognize when love was being used to negotiate against me. That recognition did not make me hard. It made me available for kinder things. Real love did not disappear because I refused counterfeit versions of it. Real love became easier to identify. It asked questions. It accepted answers. It did not need my house, my signature, or my fear to feel secure. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.